From November 14th to 21st, we're inviting you to join us for a powerful trip to Ghana. This isn't just a vacation. This is a chance to walk through the same places where many of our people were captured, held, and shipped off into slavery. So don't wait. Secure your spot today. We're making history by walking through it. Will you be with us?
Introducing the African Diaspora News Channel app, your gateway to stories that's overlooked by the corporate mainstream media.
At African Diaspora News Channel, we cover stories that don't receive mainstream attention, and we serve as the voice to the global Black community. We are committed to informing and educating through the power of media, connecting the African diaspora one story at a time.
With our platform, we're helping to end injustice by exposing it.
Join us in standing for excellence in journalism and serving our community. Download the African Diaspora News app today.
Peace, family. My name is Vicky Dillard for African Diaspora News Channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Beloved, as you come in, be sure to come in giving us a big thumbs up, and share the broadcast. Yes, we ask that you do that because that way others will know that we're here, but that we say thank you so very much. Family, we have a very important broadcast to share with you today, family. Yes? Now, you all know that I have over the years been discussing a very interesting, let's just say, adversary of the true interest, growth, development, power, and success of foundational Black Americans. Who in the world could I possibly be referring to? Before sometimes we deal with the enemy without, are y'all listening? You often have to deal with the enemy within. Now, these enemies within are not enemies that I naturally have. When you learn of someone inside of your camp, you have to deal with them first because they pose the most immediate threat to your progress. And I have to remind folks all the time, I'm always about that life of supporting my own. But when my own chooses to allow themselves to be a tool for white supremacy, they have to be immediately dealt with, not only because they serve as an immediate threat, but they serve as a direct spy and source of direct intelligence for the other side. If you've got somebody on the inside that looks like you, that's providing the outside adversaries with information about your internal movements, how far do you think you're going to go if you don't deal with the asset that the other side has inside the camps? This is the reason why we have to continue to address folk like certain folks in the Boule. I know everybody in the Boule aren't terrible, but enough of them are to where we have to just generally refer to many of them as that. And Black looking people that so-called represents the elite among us, the most highly educated, allegedly, they tend to be the most wealthiest, and they hold disproportionately the greatest platforms and power in certain places that have to do with impact. They're the ones that are typically closest to the institutions and systems that are anti-Black. Yes? So we have to address them. Why am I taking time to mention that? Because before I read you a little bit of this article, and before I go further with my commentary in these short few moments, I want you to understand this is the mindset that you have to have. Before you just run out there and just ignorantly say that, it don't take a lot of thinking to say just, oh, you're going after your people. No, you need to figure out who I'm talking about and why. You understand? Somebody like me that believes in supporting Black folks, you should question yourself about why Vicky's discussing this before you just run out and say, oh, this person look Black. You don't show a level of sophistication and an understanding on how the enemy works. And then you're sitting up wondering why we're in the same condition all these many years later. Somebody say, it's no wonder. Now, Vicky, get to where you're going. Now, I've been discussing back to back for years now, these groups. Why in particular? Because these very folks that run these agencies, I'm talking about not only folks from CNN to the MSNBC to the White House that have directly come after me or shown some disrespect or disregard for me, or has publicly done something to prove that they are not happy with my commentary. This has been a long time since I've been on different platforms. But they initially mocked it. They initially mocked me. They initially mocked others that do things similar to what I'm doing and what we do here. But now they went from mocking to attacking because we pose a very, very serious threat to folks that look like us, that are inside of the system, inside of the establishment, that is anti-Black. They're very worried. Now, I want to give you a follow-up piece today. Some of you all have obviously heard about this, but let's take a look at this article. If the team can put this article up, it's from News One. I believe Brother Phil has discussed this on one of the platforms as well, but I certainly intended to discuss this. It's been a minute since I've been back before you all, so I'm so pleased to be with you today. This headline is from News One, and the headline says, FBA, ADOS, and misinformation within the Black community. Are y'all listening? I said, are y'all listening? Hopefully that you will be able to see the article here shortly. Now let's listen to some of what they say here. And then most importantly, I need you to really focus in on my commentary that I'm getting ready to give you today. Yes? Okay. FBA, ADOS, ADOS, that's what I mean when I say that. And misinformation within the Black community. Y'all listen real good. Everybody be sure to hit that thumbs up button, share. Yes? Thank you so very much. Now, what does it say, Vicky? First of all, let's note who this is written by. It says Lawrence Ross, okay? We're told that Lawrence Ross is the writer of this piece for News One. Now, the reason why I'm emphasizing News One, and if I'm looking at this right, if I recall this right, I should say, Lawrence Rice, when I go to his X page, I think this is the guy who, I want to say he's connected here to this LawrenceRoss.com, but anyway, he's a Black journalist that clearly is about that life for the establishment and chooses to be a tool for them folks. And I'll explain to you more why I say that on the other side of this. But this Black journalist, I want you to understand, is writing for News One. News One, Roland Martin, a top irrelevant, hissy fit throwing Boule, had very strong connections with them. Now, I'm bringing this up because some of you all don't know this history. At one time, years ago, even before the most recent stuff they've been doing, there was an anonymous piece that was written from them where they were specifically dogging those within our ranks and within our camps directly. So this, I'm trying to show you, this is a long history with them. When I called it out, and then I called out the print publication for doing an anonymous opinion piece. Actually, it was called, I think it even said it was an editor's piece. But they did not put the name of the individuals. Ever since then, they've been trying to throw some willing little weakling out there who's willing to put their name on it because I drew some possible connections to Roland. Because Roland, News One had an actual physical show that Roland was on. They threw him all the way away, just like CNN threw him away, the Democrats threw him away, Hillary threw him away. Everybody throws Roland away, even the people that look like him, they throw away. But they still had a print publication, which I believe he still had some connection to. So I posited the notion that he may have been involved in it. That was some years ago, and I talked about that on multiple platforms. So because I talked about the anonymous nature in which they did that, they've been changing up to make sure that they don't do that as much because it was totally suspect in how they did that. So keep that in mind. Yes? Let's get to the article. Again, emphasizing the headline. FBA first named the attack. ADOS and misinformation within the Black community. It says here, y'all listen real close. As we head toward the 2026 midterm elections, it's important to be discerning about whose information and advice you consume. You could be listening to the wrong people. Now, let me tell y'all something right now. This was just written the 3rd week in August, so you understand this is recent. What I agree with is every single thing that first sentence says. But I'm saying to you, them telling you to be discerning about who you're listening to. Mind you, this is the reason why they're attacking us. They're telling you why they're attacking us in the first sentence. The 2026 midterm elections. That's the only thing a biscuit can know. A biscuit can only sniff out biscuits of Democrat shielding. That's the only thing a biscuit can do is smell a biscuit, a whiff of a biscuit, something in the atmosphere that's got to do with some crumbs that only they can benefit from. And that's always going to be leading up to some kind of election. They say it's important to be discerning about whose information and advice you consume. You could be listening to the wrong people. That's exactly what Foundation of Black Americans and the so-called ADOS folks that they mentioned here and other folks, whether you go by these titles or names or not, or you identify with certain groups or not, or whether you agree with everything these different groups are saying or not. Black Americans, let's just keep it that way. How about that? Black Americans who think for themselves are a very serious threat to the institution and to the establishment for which these Black-looking people represent. Listen, I'm scrolling down now. Elections have consequences, it says. It's almost a cliche at this point, something said either before an election to rally the troops to the polls or after losing an election. It's an introspection point wherein comparing and contrasting political policies, the stark reality between the actions of the victor and the promises of the defeated candidate is made clear, not just to the losers, but oftentimes to the winners too. That's what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. Y'all listen to that language. They know, they said that the losers know they losers. I'm paraphrasing. I'm giving you the Mississippi paraphrase. And the winners know what we need to do to strike to continue to win. Somebody said that would be us. And I'm talking to even some of you that are out there that are probably saying, well, some of you all that told people to stay on the couch, we got Trump, that's what we get. You wasn't getting nothing under the Democrats either, silly. Us telling you to sit on the couch, for some of us, we're not endorsing the Republican Party. I certainly wasn't. I certainly wasn't endorsing a Trump situation. It was about utilizing a strategy to let the other side know we're not going to continue to give you power while you continue to cause us to suffer from benign neglect, ignoring us, using the power we give you to vote for everybody but us. You see how at the end of the day, you wasn't getting nothing under them and you ain't getting nothing now? So you don't look good or intelligent screaming and hollering out there. That's what y'all get. No, we was getting nothing before either. See? You see how we was getting nothing and nothing? You wasn't good at math in school. You don't have to be good at math to know when there's nothing. Zeros are pretty easy to calculate. Nobody needs to be in calculus or algebra. You don't need to be a genius in any of those topics or subjects. Keep reading, Vicky. Listen to what they say next. It says that's what we're seeing in Washington, D.C., particularly in the southeast section. Black folks are being harassed from everything from smoking weed on their stoop, which in D.C. is legal, unless you're in Section 8 housing, which means you're under federal authority where you can lose your home. So simply recording the mass presence of the National Guard, FBI, DEA, and D.C. police marching through the streets, to simply recording the mass presence of the National Guard. Now, this is something I said that they clearly are copying and watching my commentary that I've done, not only on my platforms, but right here on the African Diaspora News Channel. The Boule wasn't talking about nothing about the youth being targeted by Trump and why the youth were being targeted. That was me that made the point about why they were removing the homeless, targeting the homeless and the youth and all that in case they recorded something that Trump and them didn't want y'all to see. But I digress. Let me keep going. Black neighborhoods are under a siege, and I'll bet even former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, the most popular champion of stop and frisk and broken window policing in the country, must be impressed. In America, our politics is a lie. Let me stop right there, fam. Look at me real quick. Right here, where they're sitting here pivoting, talking about Rudy Giuliani. Let me tell y'all something real quick. The reason why they're talking about Rudy Giuliani and stop and frisk is they're trying to get issues that they know that you're easily triggered by to distract you from the fact that he's sitting here talking about DC and the travesty of DC, but not focusing early on in this article on my other part of my commentary. What's that, Vicky? Where I called out the very black Mario Bowser, the black mayor there, who initially gave a weak, kind of, sort of, I'm a little bit mad at Trump a little bit for doing this, to coming out a meeting that she had with Pamela Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, to saying that she wants to embrace Trump's federal assets in her city. This black newspaper needs to be focused on why this black-looking woman is sitting there congratulating, glad-handing Trump and his administration from taking over her city with military. But instead they pivot. But I'm going to call them out on that too. I'm just trying to show you how the Boule don't like to call each other out. And they're part of the problem is what I'm trying to show you. They want you to think it's one side or the other. And you sit there and say, well, that's what y'all get for staying home on the couch. Keep reading, Vicky. Black neighborhoods are under siege, and I'll bet even former, okay, I just read that part. Skip it. Listen, y'all. In America, our politics is a lie. I'm going to actually skip that. But it says, in general, the next paragraph, the political center is where most Americans like to find their politicians, center right or center left. I'm going to keep skipping. However, the 2024 presidential election wasn't about the center. It was about an existential threat to black people. Y'all see how they do that every single year? A clear choice. Y'all listen. A clear choice between a normal political candidate and Kamala Harris. Y'all hear that? They said a clear choice between a normal political candidate and Kamala Harris for the Democrat Party and a criminal felon who'd been found liable for sexual assault and Donald Trump for the GOP. They said that Kamala is normal candidate, but it gets worse. How does it get worse? Listen, they say for rational people, even if you don't like Harris's policies, or if you didn't know a single thing about her policies, they say, the choice for president should have been as easy as thinking. Y'all hear this foolishness? Which one of these candidates would I trust around my family? The black woman with the cackling laugh, or the white guy with more criminal indictments than we have fingers and toes and whose best friend is a pedo, you know what? Yeah, tough choice. For the majority of black people, even with the slippage among black male voters enticed by the notion of embracing misogyny, an approximation to power, and who are transactional in their philosophy, we saw the threat and voted accordingly. But there was one group of loud, y'all see that? There was one group of loud and wrong black people not to vote, or to vote for everything except the top of the ballot. Because in their eyes, if the Republican and Democrat parties were snakes, then it didn't matter who was in office. FBA, and they put in parentheses, foundational Black Americans, and ADOS, American descendants of slavery folks. If you're reading this, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this crowd. Y'all listen to the tenor and the tone of this? Yes, I know they're technically two different groups under two different leaders, but I don't particularly care about these particulars or their leaders. Now, y'all know full well that FBA don't have no leader. FBA is a lineage. FBA is a bloodline. There are no presidents, vice presidents, secretaries, or treasurers, and we don't pay dues for a lineage. That's the difference between the groups. Now, you can do what you want with ADOS. I'm not here to split the difference on those titles either. I just know that ADOS attacked me early on some years ago. Some of y'all new to stuff, so y'all like to blend stuff. They attacked me. When you attack me, baby, I know you suspect. Something real wrong with you. But I'm going to leave that alone. Do what you want. I'm keep going. It says, their ideology of xenophobia, fetishization of ancestry and lineage, and the distraction that they use to divide Black people based upon whether or not one's ancestry is tied to slavery is a white supremacist dream. Of course, that's a whole bunch of madness right there. And even with some of the issues and the differences that are within these groups and even amongst these groups themselves, that's a separate story. And I will not allow us to conflate those things here. I'm going to keep going. It says, it's almost as if the long-serving FBI chief J. Edgar Hoover rose from the dead, sent a COINTELPRO 2.0 battle plan to a group of gullible Black folks, and then unleashed a torrent of flag-bearing hashtag and meme-loving xenophobic Black social media accounts on the Black community, and then watched the magic happen. Why does this matter? It matters because information, particularly in the Black community, is golden. Of the groups in this country, we as Black folks have always needed to create our independent forms of information, whether it be Black newspapers or Black Twitter, to tell our stories our way. And there's an inherent trust that all the actors in spreading information are working in our best interest. They say this is not FBA and ADOS. Y'all see the jealousy, the hate, the competition. You hear the losers. You hear the losers screeching. Now I need y'all to look at me real quick before I continue to read. Look at me real close. Come close to the screen. I promise you I'll brush my teeth. This is what you call the epitome of propaganda. And this is what you call the last gasp of the useless and irrelevant Black Boule who never served you or your interest. Remember, it was the Amanda Seal types. It was even the Tamika Mallory types, pro-activist people that went on the Breakfast Club show and dogged previous Black guests that were talking about specifically reparations, that went on there and defended the Joe Bidens of the world for things that they claimed he actually did, or the Amanda Seals that before we went to the polls for Joe Biden and Kamala, when they were on the ticket eventually together, it was Amanda Seals and them and others. I'm using her name specifically because she blatantly linked all these things together. I'm mentioning Tamika specifically because Tamika literally went on the Breakfast Club and attacked pro-reparations voices and defended a Joe Biden and wanted us to step down and to keep it down. That wasn't as important to talk. Amanda says that she didn't want to hear nothing about reparations or Kamala Harris' record before the election. These people were antithetical to that. Roland went on his platforms multiple times and said, and using his title, called us Simple Simon blankety blankers, MFers, on his broadcast. Why? Was it because we committed a violent crime? Is it because we stole something? Is it because we scammed somebody? He put that in his title for folks that wanted reparations and that disagreed with him politically. He called us those words. And he's cussed us out many other times before, which is why I started to come after him for years. So understand the difference. Don't you ever in your life conflate me from properly dealing with and attacking someone that disrespects and attacks us. I'm defending us. Don't you dare ever in your life confuse me with the other. These are the folks, Roland, that was caught up in the WikiLeaks scandal release emails. Roland Martin's name came up after His name came after that. Thousands and thousands of pages of U.S. government impropriety, illegal wars that was calling out not only the United States, but Hillary Clinton, not only Hillary Clinton, the United States and other folks, but other folks from around the world for illegalities based on local politics and geopolitics infractions, human rights violations. That WikiLeaks release, Roland's name was in it. Why am I bringing his name up? I'm not bringing his name up to give him more power. Roland is losing every time I bring him up. He loses more. He's exposed more. And I bring him up because he's a proxy for the system and the failing Democrat Party. You understand? Watch this. He came up because it was shown that he was doing back dealing and working with the Hillary Clinton campaign to provide her with unjust information related to an upcoming presidential debate. So much so that his former CNN folk, like Jake Tapper and them, publicly called him out. And he ain't been back on there since. Been trying, begging, pleading, but hadn't worked. His Donna Brazile, another black woman who was high level in the DNC, she was a DNC darling. She took responsibility for her part. She no longer worked at CNN because of the scandal in part. And Roland just let her take it. Roland initially gave a full-throated denial of any wrongdoing. Then he retracted his statement after he found out they had more information on him. You gotta ask yourself, these folks that claim they have your best interest, like this newspaper and the folks that are sitting there telling you that we should just take their word for it and we should listen to the information that they give us. These are one that's being busted left and right on working with the Democrat Party secretly, taking money from the Kamala Harris campaign like they did, Al Sharpton, his group, Roland, all them, without explicitly telling us up front, without being busted. Now they're trying to tell you all the other advertisers, white ads, advertisers that have more money than them. But the reality is they're not the ones that came and told us initially that they took this money. They're the ones that's shielding for her amongst us. I got to get ready to go. I'm going to likely do a part 2 on this. So y'all stay tuned for that. But I want to say this before I go. I got a couple more minutes. I'm going to put a pin on this part of the article so that I can do part 2. But I want to show you where I'm going in part 2. I'm reading from this book by Dr. Wesley Muhammad. The title of the book, I've been quoting from this book for years. It's called Understanding the Assault on the Black Man, Black Manhood, and Black Masculinity. You can Google it to find where you can purchase it. Listen, and I need y'all to listen real good. The reason you hear me quote the Dr. Claude Andersons of the world, the reason why you hear me constantly invoke the former DC Mayor, Marion Barry, and so forth, because these are examples of Black politicos that were in high positions that were effective in delivering tangibles, results for real Black people, working with some of the most racist white folks in the world. And both of these individuals were disliked by the system and Black-looking people. And both of these individuals also received the love of the average Black man and the Black woman. And in the case of Marion Barry in particular, even when the FBI came for him in a scandal, he was reelected for another political position with the help of the people because he delivered results when he was in office. I invoke them because the News One types and the other Black losing Boule that's jealous of our power and told you they don't want you listening to us. They don't want to point to these examples of how you do real politics. They want you to think that we don't know what we're talking about. So in addition to our commentary and common sense, I like to give you specific examples so that you will have the necessary tools to push back. But the question that you've got to ask yourself is this: how did our people get anything done in the first place? And when did white folks come to the table, whether they wanted to or not, to actually perform? Was it really voting? Let me tell you where I'm going to go with part 2 of this. Can y'all give me one more minute, couple more minutes from this book? And I'm going to read this real quick and I'm going to go. In chapter 9, this headline says the new rebellions and their aftermath. Listen closely. The seeming success of the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, y'all know about that, right? Had already greatly perturbed those elements of American society committed to the old racial hierarchy. The nonviolent activism, agitation, and social disobedience that were the tools of civil rebellion provoked the ire of, quote, law and order establishment. A governmental backlash was already in development when a game changer occurred. So just to be clear with this language, they're telling you here, he's telling you here that even with the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and all the nonviolent stuff that black folks was doing, the obedience and nonviolent stuff that we was doing, that was enough to trigger white folks to where the law and order folks were already plotting against us, even though we did all that, following their rules, doing all this nonviolent stuff. But something else happened after 64 and 65. When y'all loved to brag about us having the right to vote, when that took place, something else happened. What happened? One example. An arrest of a black motorist in 1965, August of 1965, the Watts section of South Central Los Angeles erupted into 6 days, August 11th through the 17th, of violence and confrontation with the police, resulting in 34 dead, 1,032 injured, 3,952 arrested, 600 businesses destroyed, and a total of 40 million in damages. The Watts riot, how many of y'all remember hearing about that? Or Watts rebellion was considered at that time the worst race riot in American history. But before the wounds of Watts could heal, when was Watts, family? August of 65, right? So around the time, so the civil rights had already been passed in 64. The Voting Rights Act was already passed that same year in 65. August of 65, Watts, right? What else happened? Before the wounds of Watts could heal in July of 67. Somebody said that's after the voting so-called rights. Black folks wasn't leveling up with that. Listen. Before the wounds of Watts could heal in July 1967, Detroit blew up after a police raid on a local bar. 5 days of one of the most destructive riots in the history of the United States. What was it? The Detroit Rebellion. What happened in Detroit? It resulted in 43 deleted, 1,189 injured, more than 7,200 arrests, and 2,000 buildings destroyed. Black family, did you all know about this history? That's why I talk about it for years. I'm going to keep talking about it. What happened? But these were just a prelude. What? Vicky, stop screaming. After the deletion of Dr. Martin Luther King on April 4, 1968, somebody say all this was after voting rights. Somebody say all this was after civil rights. April 4, 1968. Y'all ready for this? How many of y'all remember this? Over 100 American cities saw riots or some form of rebellion during what was dubbed as, wait for it, Holy Week Uprising. So all y'all newness, all y'all with y'all new religion, your new understanding of what religion was about, your ancestors during the 60s called that Holy Uprising. Some of the biggest rebellions were in Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Kansas City. I'm going to read this 2 more lines and that's it. And I got to go. These uprisings shook the nation. The causes were studied and recommendations were made that could prevent future explosions. After the Watts Rebellion, the Macomb Commission, how many of y'all remember hearing about that? Established by California Governor Pat Brown, identified the root of the riot as high unemployment, poor schools, and inferior living conditions for Black people. There was a 101-page report that was written that's called "Violence in the City: An End or Beginning." A report by the Governor's Commission of Los Angeles Riots in 1965 made specific recommendations to eradicate the social causes of violence. I'm skipping. That also led to, likewise, after the Detroit Rebellion, President Johnson. Y'all know anything about President Johnson? Established a National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders known as the Kerner Commission. How many of y'all remember hearing about that? Kerner. Y'all look that up. To investigate the causes in Detroit. The final 426-page Kerner report was released February 29, 1968, and it concluded that the riots resulted from Black frustration at the lack of economic opportunity, and called for the creation of new jobs, new housing construction, and the end of the de facto segregation that created the ghetto environment. I'm stopping. I gotta go. Look at me now as I end. Look. I'm gonna do part 2 to explain to you that this had nothing to do with forced state government, and even federal government buying through the former president of the United States, Mr. Johnson, to do action that had nothing to do with your voting and nothing to do with them giving you civil rights. What moved them to action is when we realized that they was just tricking us and that they were just keeping us docile with these weak laws that did nothing for our bottom lines. Wait till I go to part 2. My name is Vicky Diller, beloved. Be sure to check out my website at VickyPlanet.com. I got a lot of yummy things coming up. I got an absolutely amazing webinar coming up September 15th. Go to VickyPlanet.com for details. I can't wait to see you again.